Christian decline and right-wing populism. In recent years, numerous Western democratic nations have experienced a highly concerning surge in support for authoritarian-leaning right-wing populist leaders, political parties, and movements. Demagogic figures like Donald Trump in the United States and Boris Johnson in the United Kingdom have gained significant power by aggressively stoking nationalist sentiments, amplifying anti-establishment resentment, and promoting racist and xenophobic policies among their predominantly white working-class bases. Their alarming political ascendancy has coincided closely with a broader, decades-long decline in traditional Judeo-Christian religious affiliation, church attendance, and adherence to orthodox religious beliefs across the West, trends that show no signs of reversing course anytime soon. While correlation does not necessarily indicate direct causation, a growing body of evidence suggests this simultaneous atrophying of traditional religious participation and the eruption of far-right ethno-nationalist populism are indeed strongly interconnected. Put simply, the seismic decline of Christian fundamentalism as a dominant cultural force in most Western nations appears closely linked to the current groundswell of nationalist populism and illiberal, anti-democratic movements. As religious faith has decreased over time, the traditional faith-based moral framework that once substantially shaped society and politics has eroded. This has left behind a yawning values void in many Western countries, a void which right-wing populists have readily identified and mobilized to fill with their own alternative moral frameworks centered on racism, ultranationalism, xenophobia, anti-elite resentment, and nostalgia for a fictional past era of national homogeneity and traditional greatness. For the greater part of the 20th century, Christian fundamentalists constituted a major organized constituency and powerful voting bloc within right-leaning political movements across the West, providing motivated foot soldiers and a relatively coherent, religiously grounded worldview. However, this once mighty voting bloc has precipitously declined over the past 30 to 40 years, hollowed out by converging secular social trends. Contributing factors include the rise of secularism among younger generations who view Orthodox religion as backward and hypocritical, numerous scandals among prominent religious institutions and leaders that have undermined their moral authority, and the growing association of Christian fundamentalism with anti-scientific, anti-rationalist positions out of step with modern society. As this aging constituency has shrunk in most nations due to changing social mores, nationalist populists have adeptly filled the void, activating and weaponizing disaffected citizens who still strongly desire politics, culture, and morality framed in absolutist, traditionalist religious terms of good versus evil, sin versus virtue, heroes versus villains. Right-wing populists have built sprawling grassroots movements by enthusiastically decrying establishment elites, mainstream political parties, experts, intellectuals, and multiculturalism. This narrative, that a deracinated, globalist cabal of progressive cosmopolitan elites is waging war on ordinary citizens by promoting open borders, liberal social values, and diversity, has become the quasi-religious mythos providing coherence and animating zeal for the post-religious right-wing masses. It casts the populist leader as a heroic crusader battling entrenched, unelected powers that be determined to uproot traditional ways of life. The promised restoration of lost international status, reverse demographic change through immigration restrictions, and economic security for native workers also understandably resonates with those feeling left behind and deeply alienated by globalization, automation, shifting cultural mores, and rapid diversification of once homogeneous populations. By deftly grafting economic uncertainty onto cultural and demographic anxiety, today's right-wing populists have crafted a compelling narrative that provides simplistic explanations and solutions to complex, intersecting phenomena that many citizens understandably find destabilizing, threatening, or bewildering. These narratives strategically resonate with the cultural and ethnic homogeneity, traditional gender roles, and paternalistic family structures valorized under historical Judeo-Christian fundamentalism. The romanticized rhetorical framing harkens back to an imaginary, glorified past when traditional power hierarchies were unquestioned, communities were ethnically uniform, and radical social change was not on the horizon. Of course, it must be acknowledged that the impacts of religious decline and secularism on contemporary politics are extraordinarily complex. The erosion of the old Judeo-Christian moral consensus alone does not account for every aspect of the current rise of exclusionary populism and demagoguery. Myriad additional factors, including profound economic dislocation and inequality stemming from globalization, legitimate public distrust of societal institutions, racial resentment and status threat among dominant groups, psychological longing for authoritarian leadership during periods of social turmoil, and simple craving for cultural nostalgia during rapidly changing times, have also clearly contributed to propelling problematic figures like Trump, Johnson, and other ethno-nationalists to power. Furthermore, understanding the nuanced values of largely secular young voters today requires looking beyond the false dichotomy of religious versus non-religious worldviews. However, it seems evident that the slow corrosion of the previously dominant traditional religious framework in most Western nations has helped create a cultural opening for nationalistic strongmen to rise by offering a substitute moral value system for the non-religious. By providing compelling, quasi-religious narratives allowing individuals to make sense of their place in society, narratives characterized by familiar in-group versus out-group membership, clear binaries between good and evil, and strong culturally enforced morality, today's right-wing populists have built an alternative post-religious culture war value framework specifically designed to fill the void. And they are now skillfully reaping the political benefits of this appeal to millions of socially conservative voters' deepest needs and fears. In the long term, the waning influence of stringent Christian fundamentalism may open promising new possibilities for inclusive pluralism and humanism. But until then, pro-democracy advocates still face an arduous uphill struggle against an insurgent populist movement adept at repurposing eternal human needs for group identity, tribal belonging, and moral certitude to serve its authoritarian ambitions.